Moms, we love them. They are the first and purest love they know. They're our best friends when we're children. They are the rock. They are the glue that holds family together. And the reason why I wanted to talk about my mom today is to just talk about her struggles and to talk about what she went through and how strong she was and how selfless and how she really cared so much about her family. Mom was born in 1930 in Piscataway, New Jersey, in a small farmhouse. And believe it or not, they had an outhouse back then. It's hard to picture Piscataway, New Jersey, Middlesex County looking like that, but it was rural back then. It wasn't like it was today. She was forced to obey her parents. I mean, her life basically was, she had 14 siblings, and back then they had children because children were supposed to work on the farm, and that's how they lived. It was, you had children because you gave birth to laborers. It's kind of crazy, but that really is how it was. So the thing about my mom is, and my aunt tells me that, my Aunt Helen tells me that Mom was very quiet. She did her chores and she never complained, but the breaking point where my mom started to feel resentment is my mom went to school until 7th grade, and she was really, really great in math. And she was forced. Her parents said, you have to drop out of school. You have to go work in a factory. You have to make money, and you have to give us all your money. And their rationale for this is, you don't need your money. You're going to get married. You're going to have children. You're going to live this traditional life, and your husband's going to take care of you. And so my mom resented that. She resented that to the end of her life. So she ended up marrying my dad. And, we would go to church on Sunday. We lived the traditional Catholic life. Every Sunday, you would have that pasta sauce on the stove. Oh, it smelled so good. It was just, her cooking was wonderful. But together, my parents both resented their childhood struggles. My dad also was pushed out of school. And that's because back then they also discriminated Italians. He was pushed out of school because, they didn't want Italian immigrant children to get ahead in some situations. So, my dad had old-fashionedness about him. He dominated her, and she argued back. They fought, but they also got along too. But they had this little power struggle that went back and forth, and they would scream. Yell, scream. It was like, but at the end of the night, there my parents were holding their hands on the sofa, and you knew they loved each other, and you knew they loved you. And, the strength of my mother, too. My dad was a World War II veteran who had post-traumatic stress disorder, and my mother lived with that. My mother put up with that. And she supported him through that. So, I have to give her a lot of credit for that. That was really a hard thing to do or to go through. So just to reflect a little, my dad built our house from scratch. They had a local electronics business. My mom helped him build that business. She sewed our clothes. When we had struggles, I remember financial struggles, she sewed Raggedy Ann dolls, and she put them in our sister's shop to sell them to make ends meet. There was a flood called Doria back then, and it wiped the electronics business out. So they struggled for a while. But she made sure my sister went to Trenton State College. That was my little sister. By the time the little one came along, she knew what she had to do. She started to grow as she got older. But when my dad passed, she was so attached to my dad. And, I just don't even think she knew how to deal with it. But she stayed very strong, much stronger than I did. And actually held it together for me. And, here it was, I tried to get her out and tried to get her to socialize, but Mom's house and home was her comfort zone, and she really didn't want to socialize, and she just wanted to stay at home. That was where it was for her. So, when we look back at my mom, we look back at the struggles, you have to figure, this is like, you think about her struggles and where women were at the time. She was born only 10 years after women earned the right to vote. And, she loved her children. She was strong. She held it together for her children. The last time she saw her entire family together was at my wedding. And she had the time of her life. She socialized, introduced herself to everybody. And then she got sick very quickly. And if I could turn back the time, if I could turn back the clock, I would give her the nurturing understanding and love that a child deserves. I think they call that transference in psychology. I'd like to be her mother. So, I just have to say, we have freedoms today that we take for granted. You look back at my mother and see the way it was then, and look at now. We've come so far. And so, moms, they are our first friend, and somehow it takes an entire life to get to know them, to know their struggles, to understand what they hide behind their strengths, and to know them. And the last words I actually got to hold my mom as she passed. And the last words I said to her was, "Mom, there will never be a day in my life that I don't think of you. You are the love of my life."